Are you tired of the typical libraries with conventional music that makes you feel meh? Introducing Leerecs.com, the music website made for and by minds like you. Our team are lifelong musicians and producers in love with music. Search the Leerecs music catalogs and find music with guaranteed originality. Mark the difference with music of signature at Leerecs.com.
This we listen to is The Picture by Sita. This is one of the incredible productions made by our guest today, wonderful, incredible producer, Jack Miele. And we're fortunate to speak with Jack today. Hi Jack, how's it going?
It's going fine. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Jack has done an effort to speak with us today. He's in the middle of about 7 records right now, and we want to learn everything about what you do and your trajectory, how you got started, all of the good stuff. Please take the floor.
Well, that's a pretty broad that's some pretty broad scope there. So I guess as far as I'll start in the beginning and then work forward. How's that? As far as how I got started, I've been a career musician since I was 15. Like I started playing gigs for money, like as a professional musician when I was 15 in, cover bands and just, and I had a bunch of original bands and things like that. And, graduated high school, went to college for jazz guitar. And at that point I was like by the time I got into college, I was a steady gigging musician. And then I guess after about 3 years of college, I was so busy that I couldn't, I had a steady weekend gig. I had a 3-day-a-week Bourbon Street gig. So I was doing 5 nights a week playing guitar. And then I had a composing gig, that I was working for a software company writing music for educational video game. I had so many things going on in my early 20s that something sort of had to go. I had taken all of my music courses in college, so I dropped out at that point. And then how I got into recording was I was in a lot of original bands, and we would buy studio time and do stuff like that, and so we would spend weeks in the studio recording these records, and I always felt like it never kind of came out the way I heard it in my head, and so I would get kind of frustrated by it because I didn't know anything about recording. I come as much of a kind of control person as I am. I completely relinquished control of that facet of my life. And even though I had these composition gigs, I would do these composition gigs all within a keyboard. There was never any microphones or anything involved like that. So I basically started not knowing anything about what I was doing. I started buying gear, microphones, drums. I started with ADAT machines because I would intern at studios because I was fascinated by it. So I was an intern at 19 at studios, but I still had no idea how to record anything. I wanted to meet the musicians and be around because at that point, all I cared about was being a guitar player, So I started buying up gear, not really knowing what I'm doing, and I just started recording all of my friends for free. Because I was trying to get better at it, and I just wanted to get better at it so that I could personally record my own music and make it sound good, Right, yeah. But then what ended up happening was I got good at it because I have a very, very laser focused kind of personality. Once I decide I'm going to do something, That's all. It's like a tunnel vision thing. It's all I can do. So that focus, that being able to sit in front of a computer for 12 hours without eating or drinking and just completely focus on the same 2 minutes or 3 minutes of music was the reason why I got good at it. And once I started getting good at it, people started paying me to do it. And I started, getting paid to do it. And then I built a studio in my house. And then once I built a studio in my house, well, then it became like this thing where, okay, well, now I'm spending all my time, and this is back, in the early 2000s, probably 2002, 2003. And I was probably making $30 an hour, $25 an hour, wow. Making music like at the studio back then. So it was as far as studio costs, it was a pretty inexpensive studio. But every local band was like coming to me, and I was doing all this stuff. And then I at that point, of course, like my dreams and aspirations of recording my own music kind of went by the wayside, because people were, when you're sitting at home at 24 years old or something, 23 years old, and people, you're making $300 a day plus gig money, plus and plus the composition money I was making, because for composing, I think I was making $30 or $35 an hour or something like that to compose. So it was basically, I took that money, and of course the first thing I did was buy more gear. So it became like this sickness of like it was like this revolving door. You record somebody, let's say you make $1,000 doing their record, and then you take that $1,000 and you buy a piece of gear, and then you have to remake the money to buy the next piece of gear, and it just becomes this perpetual motion machine. And that's sort of how I got started and snowed under with gear. Like I'm definitely what people would consider a gearhead, and I have a whole bunch of different gear that I really love, because at the time I was lucky enough to have a band and I still have a band, but I was lucky enough to have a touring band that kind of paid my bills. You know what I mean? Like that gig kind of paid my bills. So everything I made recording was just extra, and so I took that money and just dumped it back into the business. And every time I got a new piece of gear, I learned something new, and then I got better and better and better. And then after Katrina hit, my studio at my house flooded. And thank God all the gear was safe, but the studio was destroyed. I had to get all the walls ripped out and everything. So at that point, I joined forces with Dave Perner from Soul Asylum, who was a friend. We had a mutual friend, and he had a studio in the Bywater. I'll go there and I'll run it. I'll bring my gear in and my clients, and I'll run it, and I'll just pay the rent. And so like I was like, I'll pay you rent for the building, and I'll just run the place, and that'll be my place, and I'll just retain the business name. And that was the Truck Farm. That's kind of how that happened. Me and George ran Truck Farm for 4 years. Truck Farm was kind of the rollover from the famous studio Kingsway. Kingsway was Daniel Lanois' studio in the 90s. A lot of famous records were done there. And basically what happened was that Truck Farm was the rollover. Like when Kingsway closed, a lot of the things that were from Kingsway, like the carpet, the lighting fixtures, all that stuff went over to Truck Farm. And then I started running Truck Farm for 4 years. And then I left Truck Farm, and I joined forces with Tom Drummond from Better Than Ezra and with Shane Theriot from Hall & Oates. And we started the studio Fudge, which was on St. Charles Avenue. And Fudge was Better Than Ezra's private studio for a while. It's where all their famous records were made. And we started that studio, and we had that studio for about 5 or 6 years. And a lot of great records came out of that studio. We had that studio, and we were working there. And then what ended up happening was, after about 5 or 6 years of keeping the doors open, Shane got the offer to do the gig with Hall & Oates. I had actually done a record with John Oates. I did one of his solo records, and Shane had met him on that record. And then when he got that gig, because him and John really hit it off, and when he got that gig, he had to move to New York. And he's like, hey man, I gotta move to New York. I got this great gig, and we were all very happy for him. And when that happened, we sort of, instead of trying to, make it with just me and Tom, we just ended up selling the building. So at that point, I moved over to the Music Shed, and I managed the Music Shed for a few years. And then I still have a personal studio inside of what used to be the Music Shed's building, but even the Music Shed at this point is been closed down, kind of, at least in that location, closed down. So there's a whole bunch of studio history here of like how things sort of went down, but there's definitely a sea change, in the studio industry, where there's a lot of private studios now, and there's kind of it seems like there's kind of a void of commercial studios, at least big ones. I know that Esplanade is certainly a big studio in Marigny, but for a music city like New Orleans, there's not a lot of, big commercial size studios. It's not, in my opinion.
Wow! This is an incredible story. What a trajectory! Amazing. Okay, so what do you think a private? I'm guessing private studio is probably a lot smaller than a commercial studio. Is that right? That's not necessarily accurate, and the reason why is because, like, all right, so you look at a studio like Piety. Piety was a fairly good sized studio. It was a really famous studio. A lot of famous records were done there. I mean, like, everything from I think Dave Matthews Band to like U2, I think, was done. I mean, it's like these are big studios, and those guys are extraordinarily cool. Like, every time, there are situations where they will rent out the studio to people who they trust. But it's not the kind of thing where you can just call. You can look them up in the phone book, and at least not to my knowledge, it's not. I'm under the impression that they work on their own projects, and then you kind of have to know somebody to get in. So that's what I mean by privatization. I understand. Wow. Huh. So, how do you spread the word, or how do you get your business usually from a band that recommends another band to you, or how does it work?
Well, I attempt to, look, most engineers or producers will tell you that, the only business card you need is your name properly credited on some piece of work, and you usually, obviously we all use social media, and we use, whatever advertising tools we can. And it's social media is a double-edged sword. There's a sense of, you try to like advertise yourself so that you can, show that you do good work, but there's like this fine line in the sand of gloating, that you try not to cross. Like it's you basically try to say like, hey, I worked on all these cool things, and I'd love to work on your project too. But it's sometimes with social media, people think that you're just bragging about yourself, and I'm not doing that. I'm attempting to just show, hey, because in the world of social media, content is king. So there's not a lot of content to show when you're holed up in your studio mixing an album for 2 weeks. So you're basically focused in on this project. So you're trying to find creative ways to keep things looking fresh, and to keep people, what's what I'm looking for, to keep people engaged. So I do my best at that, and I have people that help me with that. So how do you get the word out? You try to do good work and make sure that you're properly credited. You also use social media and try to use whatever you can, podcasts like your own,
Awesome.
to show people like, hey, I'm out there, I'm available, and I would love to work on your project, So I'm trying to also demystify the fact that I don't want to ever come off as unattainable or as untouchable. I'm just a guy. I'm a musician like everybody else that who's in this industry that likes to do good work. I care about the end result, and I care about quality, and I will go to the ends of the earth, to make sure that it's right. And also, my track record is as such that I do pretty good work, so that's basically it.
You absolutely do, because I have the Draps album, the full album, and it's incredible. The quality is just amazing. I wanted to know more of the details when you say you have to spend maybe 2 weeks inside, disappearing into the music, trying to find the right mixing. What are the takeaways? What are the secret keys that you could share with us?
It's real simple. There's an old saying in my industry: crap in, crap out. It's so many people concentrate on as far as Drab is concerned, that record was extraordinarily easy to mix. It was an easy mix, and you want to know why? Because I spent a whole lot of time making sure that the record sounded great going in. So if more people, I think, more engineers, or I don't say engineers. I mean, I don't want to point the finger at anybody, but I personally feel that in the current industry or the current atmosphere, there's so much weight put on post, and don't believe me, the post is a big deal, but I feel like people kind of dismiss what we're in the recording industry, just by the name of it, recording. It's about the recording, not about what you can fix. Right. So if you spend as much time trying to make sure that a kick drum didn't sound like crap going in, then here's a perfect example. A perfect example is I'll spend a lot of time getting drum sounds. I come from the old school. I come from the school of, back when I was an intern at studios, when I was 19, we would spend an entire day. The whole first day would be nothing but getting drum sounds, 10 hours, and I was talking to, I think I was talking to John Oates about this, when he said that when they would do records, they would spend days getting drum sounds. So, there's not a lot of people that are willing to do that these days. I mean, some people are, which is, gives me hope, but I've seen it before because I see a lot of, when I would manage studios. So like the Music Shed, I was the manager, right? So that means that I didn't necessarily engineer or record every session. Same thing with Fudge. I didn't record every session, but I would see things that would come in, and a lot of engineers would come in from out of town or whatever and want to use the room, and I would rent them the room. So, and I would watch some engineers, they would spend unbelievably inordinate amount of time EQing, or they would have a snare drum and they would say, oh, okay, and they would spend all this time EQing and compressing and all this stuff trying to fix the snare drum sound, and the one thing they didn't do was tune the drum, or maybe the drum sounds like shit, maybe the drum itself doesn't sound good, and you have to be willing to admit that. You have to be willing to, because one of the killers in our industry is what's called pride of ownership. Somebody will sit there forever and because it's their drum or their microphone. Like you get a vocal mic and you get a person who's behind the vocal mic, and maybe that mic is not right for their voice. Maybe their voice is got a certain, because everybody's voice is different, and maybe this person has a certain presence peak in the upper mid-range that makes that mic sound really hard to listen to. So instead of changing the mic, they're sitting there EQing and dealing with distances and tilting it on and off axis, trying to fix it, as opposed to just trying a different mic. And the reason why they do that is, now I understand if it's a project studio and they only have one really good mic. I understand that. But if you have a whole mic cabinet full of mics, I've seen people not change the mic because this is the brand new mic that they just got from Sweetwater that they're still paying payments on, or whatever, or this is my new vintage U47 that I just paid $20,000 for, and there's no way it can't be the right mic. So that, and look, that's a bitter pill to swallow because I've been there. I have mics that are crazy expensive that I put on people and they just don't sound good on that person for some reason. So you'll change everything under the sun, the mic pre, the compressor, the EQ, whatever. You'll change everything under the sun except for the microphone. And then finally you have to acquiesce and say, okay, I'm giving up, and I'm going to change the microphone. And then you put up a $300 SM7 and it sounds great.
Incredible.
So I've had it happen. I remember specifically I was doing a Honey Island Swamp Band record. It was their record called Good to You. It's I get a lot of people who actually still come up to me, talk about that record because they like that record. And that record has got that was like my homage to like Tres Hombres by ZZ Top or something. Like it's just had that kind of vibe to it, real flat sounding. Like we didn't use any condenser mics at all on the drums, not one. Nice. It was all dynamic or ribbon, and that's it. And same thing with the guitars, no condenser. The only condenser mics used on the entire album were only on Chris Miele's vocals, because we sat there, we rented a U48 for that session, and it was costing us $200 a day or something, $150 a day. I can't remember what it was, but it was costing us hundreds of dollars a day to rent this microphone, and it just didn't sound good on Aaron's voice. And we kept trying and trying and trying, and we just couldn't get it to sound good. And finally, we threw up an SM7, and it sounded awesome. And so we were sitting there renting this mic for him for no reason. Like, we were spending this money in the budget for no reason. We ended up using a $300 mic that he held in his hand, and yeah. And now Chris Miele, we used the 48 on his vocal, and it actually sounded great. So it wasn't completely in vain, but it was just so funny that we were like, that you deal with these. A lot of times as an engineer, you get wrapped up in gear and not in objectivity, or like objectively, this sounds better than I know that. I guess it could be subjective, but sometimes the writing on the wall is so clear. Like this just isn't sounding good. We need to try something else.
That's incredible. It's such a. This is a craft. You have to acquire the skill. Who would figure that kind of thing? Like not the best, not the most expensive mic is the right one. So this is.
Well, a lot of it is will. It's having the will to be willing to throw away what you've done, or to throw away a certain idea, or to to be willing to say that, okay, this is maybe not the best idea. And that's hard for people. That's hard for people to say, okay, the drum set that I saved up all year long for doesn't sound as good as this other drum set that we bought at a thrift store. It's hard to do that. It really is. And I'm not necessarily saying that it sounds bad, but it doesn't sound right for what we're doing. Like, I'll give you a great example. If you had a great sounding snare drum that sounded like that cost you $500, but that snare drum, the way it is, it's a metal snare drum, and it's only a 13-inch snare drum, and it's this or that or the other or whatever. And when you hit it, it sounds like something off of like a Dave Matthews record or a 311 record. Very high pitched, specific sounding, and you guys are trying to cut a track, and you're trying to get the drum sounds from, Dreams by Fleetwood Mac. Mm-hmm. It's just not the right application. You're trying to use, a spatula to scoop ice.
Right.
It's just not the right application. That's why I have a whole bunch of different gear, because it's like colors on a paint palette. I'm trying to get something specific. Now, I love limitations. I love when I walk into a place and like, hey, all we have is this. So we're going to use this stuff and make it sound as good as we can with what we're given. That kind of stuff really excites me. I like trying to get, because I've made great records, really great records on an Allen and Heath, that, console that cost $300. So I mean, it's really, and that's the great news of today too, about engineers and studios and stuff. Man, it just wasn't around in the late 90s, early 2000s. The ability to buy really great sounding gear at a fraction of the cost, because it's made for that market. There are great companies out there like Warm Audio and Black Lion Audio and and companies like what's the other one that's Golden Age and when you get into the Impersonus, it's a fantastic company. There's all these companies that make this stuff, and they make really solid stuff that gets the job done. I mean, is it the Neve API, SSL stuff? No, it's not. But it's pretty damn close. And when you A/B it, when you have the real thing, I'm lucky enough to have the real thing. I mean, so when I have the real thing, and another hard pill to swallow is when you go to say, okay, I'm going to put this Warm Audio Neve clone up against a real 1073, and we're going to listen to the differences. It's apparent which one is the Neve, but I always say this to people. It's does the Neve sound better? Yes, it does. Does it sound $7,000 better? That's debatable. Mm-hmm. It really is. Does it sound $1,000 better? $2,000 better? Absolutely. But does it sound $7,000 better? I don't know.
Right.
Because that's what those channels are going for now.
Wow. I mean, this is incredible. I'm blown away. But you have to develop this amazing ear to discern these type of details, right? And
absolutely, it's. I tell this to people all the time, is that the worst thing is when you don't know what you don't know. That's really the thing, is that you get a lot of people that, and I am still even in that. There's a lot of things where I don't even know what I don't know. Where I've been doing this a long, long time, and I still get surprised when and I'll learn something, that a technique or something about really the art of mixing is really something that's a lifelong journey, where as I feel like engineering to me is a little more finite to me. Mm-hmm. It's still an art. I don't want to say that engineering isn't an art. But I feel that engineering is so dependent on a few things. It's dependent on your ears, your willingness of the time that you take. It's the source. The source is really the big deal. Does the guitar amp sound good in the room? Does the drums sound good? Does the guy know how to hit the drums? Does he hit the drums too hard and they get choked down? They don't resonate correctly. There's all these little tiny things that you have no control over. And a big deal that gets overlooked time and time again, which is something that I try to preach to people because studios are going away. The room itself is a huge deal. It's probably the biggest deal, in my opinion. But oh yeah, and see, you're surprised by that. I used to not put as much emphasis on the room until I was left without one. Until I was left without one, and I went, holy crap, how am I going to make this sound three-dimensional when the room I'm trying to track in is only 25 feet square? You know, so most people nowadays, we live in a DI world. You know, DI meaning direct input. Like you listen to a record that's, you know, like a record like the Billie Eilish record. I'll talk about her because I just saw her in the Oscars last night, and she was phenomenal. So like she's, you know, her and her brother are great. They do great work. But that record, the but here is that I don't know this because I didn't work on the record, but probably the only microphone on that record is her voice. And she even said what it was. It was a TLM 103, I think. It was the Neumann mic. And I think that she holds it really close to her mouth, and she sings really softly, so it gets this huge sound, you know. So that being said, everything else on that record has been what's called DI'd. It's a keyboard that's plugged straight into an interface, or a bass that's plugged into an interface, or even, you know, now people are making guitar records like these, you know, rock records where, you know, Kemper has come out with these amp modelers and Fractal and all these things, and people just plug DI straight into the Fractal or the Kemper and go straight into Pro Tools. And then now they're using these, you know, BFE or whatever drum programs where they just program the drums via MIDI, and the only thing that becomes the only live mic is the vocal. Well, you can make some really, really great sounding records like this. But the only difference is that the records have a difference in dimension. There seems to be a lack of Z-axis, you know, and because it's easy to make a record that sounds big and wide, it's not easy to make a record that sounds deep. Z, you know, so there's no depth in the record, and that was what happened when I dealt with a band like Silverdose. You know, they were used to making a record where everything was sort of DI'd, and I basically went against that. I said, you know, we're going to put you in a room, and we're going to put mics in front of the amp. Like, what's missing is exactly that, the room. The distance, the sound being pushed out of a speaker. When you stand in front of a speaker, a PA speaker at a club, you can feel it. Like, you know, there's sound waves being moved through a room that are being captured, and that is what creates, to me, that axis, that Z axis. And when everything is DI, there's no distance with anything. Everything is really super, super, super close, like this. So there's no distance with anything, you know, and that's one of the things that I try to keep alive, because all of my favorite records have that, you know, and once again, this is something that's, you know, we're getting super deep into, you know, the psychology of records, because most people, when they listen to records, they don't realize that. They don't realize that that's missing. You know, they might sense it, that something's different or something is whatever, but they don't understand why, you know, why this new band's record doesn't sound like, you know, that Alice in Chains record they heard when they were a kid, you know, like, or what's different about this, you know, and even modern records. That's why there are a lot of really inspiring engineers out there, you know, who make these records that still keep, you know, that thing alive. You know, they're tracking correctly, and they're making incredible sounding records.
Wow. This is incredible. Maybe you gave me a lot to think about. Maybe this is what I'm missing from my records. This is probably what it is.
Yeah.
Wow, this is incredible.
like the Drab record. Everything on that record is real. There's no trickery or or like those guys track that live. Like basically we spent almost an entire day getting drum sounds. I want to say I used something close to 30 microphones on the drums.
Oh, wow.
And we spent a whole day getting drum sounds, which, by the way, to be able to put that many microphones on a drum set and not have phasing issues is that in itself takes a long time and a lot of knowledge, you know, and I think it was like 24 mics. It might have been 24. But anyway, we did that. And then bass, sure, I used a DI, but it's really an amp that's been put, you know, in a room with 2 microphones on it. And then all those sounds are blended together. I also, with Steve's mic, with Steve's amp, it was a Marshall half stack in a room, a separate room. It had 2 mics on the cabinet. And then we did a distance mic out in the hallway that would capture the mic, the sound from maybe 10 feet away. And then that was blended in as a natural reverb because the foyer that we had that mic in was all like concrete and terrazzo floors. So any reverb you hear on the guitar is actually real reverb from a room. It's not a plug-in, you know, and then they tracked live as a band with, I don't even think they used a click track. That's another thing. A lot of the things that make records sound sterile, we kind of did away with. I don't believe we used a click track. We might have, but I don't think we did. Mm-hmm. And then they played live like normal. And then Steve went back and did a second guitar track doubling what he played. And then we did vocals and solos, and that was it.
Incredible. Wow.
You know?
Okay. Wow, we could talk for so long. I have so many questions for you. I just want to, what's your part at on the arrangements?
As a producer, mm-hmm. You know, as far as arrangements, as a producer, I don't want to say that. Like, I could tell you this, that there were, you know, it took me a minute. We'll talk about the Drab record. It took me a minute to get my head around a few things because instinctually I wanted to do some editing. Like, cause you know, everybody is trying to, they come in and everybody has the same idea that, hey, we want this record to explode and we want to be, you know, the next big band. And, you know, that I get a lot of that, you know? So my head goes into that mode of, okay, we need to lean this up. We need to do this. We need to do that, you know? And like for instance, with Drag, like it was my instinct to want to edit some of the songs so that maybe some of the intros weren't as long. Maybe some of the outros weren't as long. Maybe we cut this superfluous thing out or whatever. But once, you know, Steve had a vision, and once I got that vision where he was like, okay, you know, I don't really care about it being a 3-minute single. I care about, like, I want it to be like the records I grew up listening to, which, you know, I said, okay, great. Then once that happened, I backed off. And only when I heard something that I thought was anomalous did I step in and say, hey, that melody line doesn't work over that chord. It's rubbing. It sounds weird. It's, you know, or that kind of thing. Now, then there's the complete opposite end of the spectrum where, you know, there's some bands that I work with. There's one that I'm working with right now that we're very much in tune with, you know, how long is the song? How soon does the vocal come in? How are these harmonies going to work? Do we want, like, you know, I'm very involved, you know, so it really just depends on the artist. It depends on what they're going for and what they're attempting to get out of them. You know, being a great producer is just being a communicator, you know, is understanding who you're talking to, understanding what their vision is and what they want, and trying to just guide them, you know, because I've certainly been on every end of the spectrum as far as what people are looking for, you know. So that's basically how involved I am. It just really depends on the project.
Right. Well, but you know, like it still takes that respect and, like you said, that communication
Sure.
to understand, the level of involvement. Incredible! Wow.
Yeah, there was a record that we just did for an artist named Danny Moon that, she, she was very wanting us to like interject like with arrangements. So she would send us these demos that she did on her iPhone, and we would, we would basically sit down and completely arrange the song for her, and then send her back our demo of the arranged song. And she would be like, okay, love this, don't love this. And then we would do Rev 2 demo and send that to her. And she would, yep, that's it. And then we would go in and execute. So pre-production is a big deal. Certain bands like Drab didn't need a lot of pre-production because Steve had such a vision already that, it was basically, me going in and acting more in the interest of Sonics. Saying, okay, I'm going to be the engineer and the producer, but I know that you're going for a certain vibe on this, and it's my job as a producer to capture that vibe. So that's basically what we did.
Fantastic. Well, all right. So, Jack Miele, such an amount of knowledge and big trajectory. Love to have you once again. If whenever you wish. This is fantastic.
Yeah, would love to do it again.
Love it. So we always ask the following: if you had an advice for your younger self, would you have anything to say?
Well, sure. Okay, if to young engineers, just everything that you need is in those records that you love. Listen to people, listen to records, and really dive into why do these records sound great, and what's different about my records that I'm aspiring to that don't meet up with these other records, because I still do it. At this level, I'm doing mixes right now, and I'm going, okay, this is a great, like I'm doing a record right now that it sort of sounds like a Green Day kind of like, modern punk kind of thing. And the first thing I did was take American Idiot, which is an engineering masterpiece, and put it into the track. That I try to use references, of, okay, this is something that I respect, and I'm trying to hit that trajectory, that target, so I feel like, for all the engineering schools and for all of the online courses and everything, it's like if people just listened with a more critical ear, I think that they would find a lot of answers. And as far as young musicians, just try to think of yourself. I would say that, like, if you're trying to be a successful musician, just think of yourself as a business. That would be my advice to you, is to don't think of yourself as an individual anymore. Think of yourself as an entity, and and then try to work it like that. Because the hardest thing about being in a band is keeping it together. So many bands, break up before, because there's too many personal things that get in the way, and not enough focus on how do we make this a successful business.
Correct. Fantastic advice from Jack Miele. Really treasure of knowledge and engineering, production. Incredible privilege to have him today. Thank you so much, Jack. Truly
Thank you.
Having you on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, so we're going to listen a little bit more of one of Jack's works. This is The Picture by Sita. And until the next one.
Yeah, you got me the picture.
Are you tired of the typical libraries with conventional music that makes you feel meh? Introducing Leerecs.com, the music website made for and by minds like you. Our team are lifelong musicians and producers in love with music. Search the Leerecs music catalogs and find music with guaranteed originality. Mark the difference with music of signature at Leerecs.com.